Welcome to Interfaith Voices, the independent show exploring the religious and spiritual diversity of today's world. I'm Maureen Fiedler. Most of us think of Jehovah's Witnesses as the folks who knock on doors to do missionary work. But there's more, much more. John Parman reports.
Like I have, you've probably encountered Jehovah's Witnesses on your walk to work, on your way to drop off your dry cleaning, or on your front step. With 2.5 million Jehovah's Witnesses in North America, devoting over 213 million hours to preaching, you're bound to have a Jehovah's Witness on your doorstep sometime. Now, PBS will look at the witnesses in a new documentary entitled Knocking, premiering May 22nd on most public television stations. We have the pleasure to be joined by the director of Knocking, Joel Engardio. Joel, welcome to Interfaith Voices.
Glad to be here.
I imagine you were one of those kids knocking on doors and standing on the corner handing out Watchtower.
Yes, as a young kid, my mother is a Jehovah's Witness and converted when I was young, and she took me door to door, probably as early as the age of 5 or 6. I was knocking on doors, ringing doorbells, handing out the Watchtower magazine with my mom in Saginaw, Michigan. It's interesting as a young kid, to knock on a stranger's door. It really gives you a thick skin. I think it prepared me in my future career as a journalist. Now I'm fearless in speaking to anyone.
So you really were scared at that time?
I do have memory of one time someone sicked their dog on my mother and I, so that was scary. Other than that, sometimes people were mean or would slam their door, or sometimes people were nice. If it was hot outside, they'd invite you in the air conditioning or offer you a drink. So it just ran the spectrum as far as being a stranger knocking on a door with a religious message.
You say your mother converted to Jehovah's Witness. Does that mean there was a time before the age of 5 where you were not a member of that group?
There's photographs of me at Christmas time wearing a Santa's hat as a baby, so clearly my mom was not a Jehovah's Witness then. Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate Christmas or other holidays, but most of my memory as a young child was not celebrating holidays. Not celebrating holidays wasn't that traumatic of a thing. If that's the worst that you go through as a kid, I can't complain. When you're in elementary school and the kids have a Christmas party and you have to go sit in the library, that's not pleasant. But, again, it's not the worst thing in the world.
You said in the documentary that you were actually suspended at one point for refusing to make the Pledge of Allegiance. Can you tell me what happened in that incident?
Well, that was in the 3rd grade. I was just sent to the principal's office. So Jehovah's Witnesses will not pledge allegiance to the flag or salute the flag. They see it as an act of worship to a man-made symbol. They see it as idolatry. So as a young kid, when it's the Pledge of Allegiance time, I opt out of it. That day we had a substitute teacher who thought I was just acting up and didn't quite believe this fantastical tale I told her about how we're not supposed to pledge allegiance to idols. So off to the principal's office I went. But, this happened in the early 1980s where this issue went to the U.S. Supreme Court back in the 1940s, where Jehovah's Witnesses created a landmark decision which says a free country can't force its citizens to pledge allegiance to patriotic symbols.
And that's really been a real milestone in the Jehovah's Witnesses. They're one of the few religious organizations that, while being apolitical and not voting, have taken to the courts to address many religious liberty issues.
That's right. So Jehovah's Witnesses are apolitical. They don't vote because they say no man-made government could ever solve the world's problems. So we only put our stock or our faith in God and God's kingdom. What they've done is they've gone to the U.S. Supreme Court a record 62 times, more than any other group, trying to defend or define what is the First Amendment, what is free speech, what is freedom of religion. And then the cases they won then set precedent in the modern civil rights movement. But ironically, again, groups the witnesses don't agree with. Witnesses are strict moral conservatives, social conservatives. So when they see abortion rights or gay rights groups benefiting from cases they've won, they're not troubled by that, even though they don't agree.
I want to ask you about that idea of moral conservatism while being apolitical. You say that it represents a different kind of fundamentalism. Can you explain that?
I think fundamentalism has been a bastardized term. It's something that only has a negative connotation because we use it on groups who have firm beliefs and then force those beliefs on others through either legislation or violence. And so Jehovah's Witnesses, I see it as they're classic fundamentalists in the sense that they have strong conviction, they stand firm, they won't budge on their beliefs, and they want to share them with you and I as they go door to door, which, we may find annoying. But that message, that speech, that's all it is. It ends at your door. When you say, no thanks, that's it. They don't go and force you to live their belief by amending the Constitution or creating a law that says you have to live this way or the other way. So I see it as a different kind of fundamentalism in that in my film I quote a rabbi who says this is not a question of whether fundamentalism is bad. It's a question of what kind of fundamentalism we're going to have. So are we going to have the kind that's violent or the kind that goes around and legislates their beliefs for everyone? Or are we going to have the kind that sticks true to their faith and is not shy to tell you about their faith, but it's all about choice. You can choose to be a Jehovah's Witness or not.
And what was so surprising in the film were how you illustrated ways that Jehovah's Witnesses stayed out of political affairs. For example, I didn't realize how many Jehovah's Witnesses died in concentration camps during World War II.
Yeah, it really is an untold story. Jehovah's Witnesses have been around since 1879. So by the 20th century, they were already in Europe. By the time Hitler came to power, Jehovah's Witnesses had been in Germany 20, 30 years.
How many were there, do you think?
In Germany and Nazi-occupied lands, there are about 35,000 Jehovah's Witnesses. And so these are all German citizens. These are all quote-unquote Aryans. But they refused Hitler's Nazi party. They refused to say Heil Hitler because of this belief that don't put faith in any man. Only God's kingdom will solve the world's problems. They would go door to door in Germany saying, don't put your faith in this man Hitler. Hitler didn't like that. So he rounded them up and put them in the concentration camps. They were actually among the first to put into the camps. And also the witnesses saw what was happening to Jews and other groups, and so they tried to alert the world as to what was happening. As early as the mid-1930s, they were announcing, even in the United States, through their publications and on the radio, about what was going on in the concentration camps.
While Jehovah's Witnesses don't put a lot of faith into secular government or human government, only 144,000 people can go to heaven, as the Jehovah's Witnesses say. Yet there are 7 million of them in the world. How do they gel with that belief and the stricture of it?
It's a very interesting question, because to understand that concept, you have to completely reverse what a typical Christian would think as the ultimate purpose or goal or reward in life. So Jehovah's Witnesses do not want to go to heaven. To them, that's not the ultimate goal. See, Jehovah's Witnesses, they talk about God's kingdom on earth. So a Jehovah's Witness looks forward to a time, it's like the John Lennon song Imagine, this utopia on the physical earth where there's no pollution, where there's no war, there's no political boundaries, there's no governments. Everybody lives in basically a Garden of Eden, but here on the physical planet, Earth, not up in the sky, not in the heavens. The vast majority of witnesses have no desire, don't vie to go to heaven, don't try to get on the list. So it's hard for mainstream Christians to wrap their head around that concept, because for most, heaven is the end-all, be-all, but for the Jehovah's Witness, it's not.
Joel Engardio is the director of Knocking, the new PBS documentary on the Jehovah's Witnesses. It premieres on most public television stations on May 22nd. Joel, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
For Interfaith Voices, I'm John Parman.